Chloe was 26 and already had the kind of family life that made her days feel packed from the moment the sun came up. She and Garth lived together in a little three-bedroom house on a quiet street lined with maple trees that blazed orange in the fall and dripped with rain through spring. Between them, they raised 4 kids, her 2 from a past relationship, his 1 from before her, and the baby they had together. Their home was never silent. Laughter, bickering, cartoons humming in the background, and the steady thrum of chores made up the soundtrack of their days. When Chloe had first gotten serious with Garth, she tried her best with his mother, Debbie. It felt important to her because Garth was close with his family, and Chloe thought it would help if she and Debbie built something warm and easy. She went out of her way to suggest dinners, coffee dates, and even helped her with her small online craft business, packaging items at Debbie's cluttered dining table while listening to her talk about yarn colors and fabric sales. But soon Chloe realized there was always a problem waiting just around the corner with Debbie. No matter how simple the situation, it seemed to turn into a storm. One night, when Cindy, Garth's daughter, had a terrible flu, Chloe and Garth decided to be strict with her meals. Cindy had been coughing and wheezing through the nights, her chest rising and falling with that tight rattle that made parents' hearts race. They agreed on no dairy; it would make breathing harder. Debbie came by with soup and cookies, and Chloe gently explained about the dairy rule. Debbie nodded, lips trembling, but later Chloe found out she'd slipped Cindy a glass of milk anyway. Chloe's heart thudded with anger. She confronted her, voice sharp, and Debbie's eyes filled instantly with tears. She didn't apologize for ignoring the rule. Instead, she began sobbing about how she thought she had caused Garth's diabetes years ago, as if dragging the spotlight away from Cindy's needs and onto her own guilt. Chloe felt herself snap. She told Debbie if she didn't stop the crying, she'd throw her tea at her. The words were harsh, out before Chloe could reel them back, but Debbie stopped crying. The room went quiet, except for Cindy's soft cough in the next room. That became a pattern. Every time Debbie was called out on something, she folded into tears, making herself the victim. There was also the matter of Debbie's hoarding. At first, Chloe didn't realize how deep it went. A few boxes here, a couple of bins there, but soon their porch filled with old bags of clothes. Their garage swallowed stacks of furniture she swore she'd sell someday. Even the side yard had boxes covered in plastic tarps. And Debbie's own house, plus her late parents' house, were jammed full of things she couldn't let go of. Chloe and Garth tried to set boundaries. They told her the porch and garage needed to be cleared. Debbie cried again, wailing about how they were pressuring her, about how she couldn't possibly let go of her things. Chloe stared at the clutter and thought about how it felt like Debbie wanted to live in their space too, burying them under piles of her belongings. Then there were the little jabs, the digs Debbie made, especially at Garth. Like the time he saved reward points for months and used them to buy a set of Pokemon cards. He was like a kid again, opening the package with a smile, showing Chloe and the kids the shiny cards. Debbie frowned and said he should have used the points to get a weed eater. The joy drained from his face. Chloe, protective, snapped back that he deserved to buy what he wanted, that he earned it. Debbie stormed outside in a huff, disappeared into the garden, and didn't return for an hour. The kids, Declan and Dylan, ran around the yard in a panic, calling for her. Even Garth's 90-year-old grandfather sat on the couch inside, looking helpless and tired. Chloe watched it all and felt a knot growing inside her. It wasn't just about milk or clutter or Pokemon cards. It was that Debbie couldn't handle being told no, couldn't bear to let anyone else be happy without finding a way to spoil it. There were also the words Debbie muttered like daggers slipped into casual conversation. Once she told Garth, while Chloe was right there, that he wasn't the same when he was with these people. These people, meaning Chloe and the kids. Chloe swallowed her hurt and reminded herself that some people just didn't change. It reached a point where Chloe stopped trying. She kept things polite but distant. When Debbie came over, Chloe offered pleasantries, maybe a hello and how are you? Then she sat at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone, keeping her answers short. There was no more effort to build bridges. The bridges had burned, and Chloe wasn't walking on the ashes. Still, Debbie never stopped finding ways to sting. One evening, after dinner, Debbie was gathering her purse to leave. She looked at Garth, then glanced sideways at Chloe, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Any woman would be lucky to have you. That Chloe, she's always so ugly to me. I got along with your ex-wife way better. At least she apologized when we fought. Chloe never will." Chloe's hands clenched, but she stayed silent. Later, Debbie sent her a message claiming she felt unwelcome, saying Chloe was disrespectful and cold, accusing her of wanting to cut her out of Garth's life. Chloe breathed deeply before answering. She told Debbie they could have coffee and talk it over sometime, but not that night. She had kids to put to bed, a house to settle, and a headache brewing. But privately, Chloe was done. She told herself she wouldn't let Cindy sleep over at Debbie's anymore. She didn't trust Debbie to follow rules or keep the environment healthy. If Debbie wanted to see the kids, she could come to their house, but she'd have to keep things pleasant. Chloe wouldn't tolerate the negativity, the digs, the endless drama. She thought back to all those times she'd tried, all the coffees, the dinners, the help with business. She thought about the clutter on her porch, about Cindy wheezing through the flu, about the way Garth's face had fallen at his mother's criticism. Maybe she wasn't playing nice anymore. Maybe she was simply protecting her home.
Chloe reminded herself often that she hadn't walked into the relationship with a chip on her shoulder. When she met Garth, she was cautious but hopeful. He was steady, patient, and had a way of making her laugh even on the hardest days. He didn't flinch at her two kids, Declan and Dylan, bouncing off the walls, nor did he shy away from responsibility when their baby came along. But it was never just about her and Garth. It was always her, Garth, the kids, and his mother hovering in the background. Chloe tried to embrace it at first. She told herself that family was family, and if she wanted a future with Garth, she'd have to figure out a way to coexist with Debbie. That's why she had sat at Debbie's kitchen table so many afternoons, sipping lukewarm coffee out of chipped mugs, nodding along to stories she'd heard 3 times already. That's why she'd driven across town to help package crafts for Debbie's online shop, taping boxes closed while Debbie fussed about shipping labels. Chloe wanted connection, respect, even just a small slice of warmth between them. The thing that broke her spirit wasn't one big fight, though. It was the constant little cuts. Debbie crying whenever she was asked to respect a boundary. Debbie twisting any moment into a chance to make herself the victim. Debbie criticizing Garth in front of the children, as though reminding everyone that in her eyes, he was never quite enough. Chloe remembered one particular afternoon when she caught Debbie sneaking Cindy a carton of chocolate milk after they had all agreed dairy was off the table. Cindy's cheeks flushed with guilt, a faint milk mustache above her lip as she whispered, "Not to tell Mom." Chloe's blood ran hot. Debbie doesn't just ignore her, she undermined her in front of the kids, teaching them that rules didn't matter if Grandma said otherwise. Later, when Chloe confronted her, Debbie's eyes filled instantly with tears. Not, "I'm sorry, I didn't think it through," not, "I'll do better next time." Instead, it became a swirl of guilt about how she'd ruined Garth's health years ago, how she'd failed as a mother, how everyone was too hard on her. Chloe stood there in the kitchen, hands trembling around her mug of tea, and snapped. The words flew out. "If you don't stop crying, I'll throw this tea at you." Harsh, unkind, but the crying stopped. Debbie sniffled, looked away, and silence settled heavy around them. After that, Chloe knew things would never be easy again. The hoarding made it worse. Chloe's porch, once her favorite place to drink morning coffee, became a dumping ground. Old boxes labeled holiday that never got opened, plastic tubs with broken toys, garbage bags stuffed with who knows what. She'd trip over them carrying groceries, shove them aside when the kids wanted to play outside. The garage was worse. Debbie stacked it with her late parents' furniture, broken lamps, and stacks of newspapers. Every time Chloe tried to bring it up, Debbie wailed about being pressured, about how her children wanted to strip her of her memories.
It wasn't just messy. It felt like Debbie was planting a flag in Chloe's space, reminding her that no matter how hard she tried, she wasn't fully in charge of her own home. The criticism of Garth cut deepest. Chloe had watched him work double shifts, patch holes in the drywall, stay up late helping Dylan with math homework. He deserved kindness, but Debbie nitpicked every little thing. That day with the Pokemon cards was etched in Chloe's mind. Garth's eyes lit up as he opened the pack, sharing the excitement with Cindy and Declan, who leaned in wide-eyed. For a moment, he wasn't a man stretched thin. He was a kid again, happy. Debbie walked in, looked down at the cards and said coldly, "You should have used those points to buy a weed eater." The joy vanished from his face, like air leaking from a balloon. Chloe's chest tightened. She jumped to his defense, snapping that he could spend his points however he wanted, that he deserved this little thing. Debbie's lips pressed tight, she stormed outside, and disappeared into Chloe's flower beds. An hour passed while the kids searched for her, calling her name, convinced something was wrong. Meanwhile, Chloe sat on the couch, watching Garth slump forward, his grandfather staring blankly at the carpet. Moments like that drained Chloe's patience until there was almost none left. The little digs kept coming. "You're not the same when you're with these people," meaning Chloe, meaning the kids. Every problem, every spilled cup of juice, every back talk, every small spat was somehow Chloe's fault. Debbie's voice carried that edge of judgment, as if Chloe's very presence had spoiled her son's life. That's when Chloe decided to stop. Stop chasing after approval. Stop trying to win over someone who didn't want to be won. She narrowed her role down to polite distance. "Hello, how are you? Here's the door." She kept her phone close when Debbie visited, thumbs busy, eyes down. But Debbie wasn't one to leave well enough alone. That night after dinner, when she picked up her purse and aimed her words like arrows, Chloe felt each one land. "Any woman would be lucky to have you. That Chloe, she's always so ugly to me. I got along with your ex-wife better. At least she apologized. Chloe never will." The air was thick. Chloe swallowed her words, refusing to give Debbie the satisfaction of a reaction. Later came the message, Debbie claiming she felt disrespected, unwelcome, accusing Chloe of trying to push her out of Garth's life. Chloe read it twice, jaw tight. She typed back calmly, "We can meet for coffee and talk it out, but not tonight. I have the kids and I have a headache." But in her mind, Chloe was done bending. She would not let Cindy stay overnight in that chaos anymore. She wouldn't invite Debbie into their lives without rules. If Debbie wanted time with the kids, she could come to their house, but she would behave. She would not drag her drama, her pills, or her negativity through Chloe's front door. It wasn't about being cruel. It wasn't about shutting her out. It was about building a fence around her home, around her children, around the man she loved. Chloe wasn't interested in playing nice anymore. She was interested in keeping peace where peace mattered most, inside her own four walls.
Garth noticed the shift before anyone else said a word. He watched the way Chloe's smile stiffened when his mother came around, the way she let silence do the talking instead of trying to soften things. He didn't blame her. He had seen his mother pull those tricks for years. The tears, the guilt, the backhanded comments. But it was different when Chloe was the one under fire. One night, after Debbie left, he leaned against the counter while Chloe packed lunches. He said quietly, "I know she's hard. I don't expect you to keep trying if it drains you." Chloe closed the lunchbox lid with a snap and told him she wasn't trying anymore. She was protecting her home. Garth nodded. Deep down, he was relieved. Debbie, however, wasn't about to let things slide. She showed up the following weekend with bags of groceries, pushing past Chloe at the door like she still had a key to everything. She filled the fridge, rearranged the pantry, clucked at the kids about eating too much sugar. Chloe stood back, arms crossed, pulse quickening. It was her kitchen, her rules, and Debbie was bulldozing through like she owned it. Later that afternoon, Chloe pulled Garth aside and laid it out plainly. "This is our home. She doesn't just get to come in here and act like she runs it. If she wants to visit, she's welcome. But there are rules. No criticizing you, no undermining me, no backhanded digs. If she can't manage that, then she doesn't come in. Garth swallowed hard, knowing what kind of storm that would create, but he didn't argue. He had spent too many years being the son who bent, who smoothed things over, who let his mother's moods dictate the room. He was tired too. When Chloe told Debbie the new boundaries, she braced herself for the tears. She wasn't wrong. Debbie's eyes watered instantly, her lip trembled, and her voice rose. Rules? In my own son's home? You're turning him against me, Chloe. You're making me the villain. Chloe stayed calm. These aren't about making you the villain. They're about respect. If you can respect us, you're welcome. If not, you're not. Debbie left in a flurry, muttering under her breath about ungrateful children, about how she had sacrificed too much to be treated this way. The fallout didn't take long. She started calling Garth late at night, leaving voicemails about how she felt abandoned, how Chloe was ruining their family. Sometimes she slipped notes into Cindy's backpack, dramatic letters about missing her granddaughter. Chloe intercepted one and sat down with Garth, her hands shaking with anger. It's manipulation, she told him, using the kids as messengers. That's not healthy. The kids began to notice too. Declan asked one night at dinner why Grandma always looked so sad when she left. Dylan, younger and more blunt, said Grandma was weird, that she acted like a kid whenever she didn't get her way. Chloe bit her tongue but thought to herself, even the children can see it. The tension reached its peak when Debbie called demanding that Cindy spend the weekend with her. Chloe refused, gently but firmly. Not until we know things are stable over there. Not until we can trust that rules will be respected. Debbie's voice cracked through the phone, accusing Chloe of poisoning her son's mind, of stealing her grandchildren. Chloe held her ground, ending the call before the words could escalate further. Afterward, she sat on the couch, her heart pounding. Garth sat beside her, silent, staring at the floor. Finally, he looked up and said, I've never seen anyone stand up to her like that. Chloe rested her head against his shoulder. Someone had to. In the weeks that followed, Chloe noticed something she hadn't expected. The house felt lighter. Without Debbie's constant presence, the kids laughed more. Garth smiled more. Even Chloe's own shoulders seemed to relax when she walked through the door. The absence of conflict brought peace, and Chloe realized she had been starving for it. Still, Debbie lingered on the edges. Texts accusing Chloe of coldness, messages dripping with guilt, but Chloe stopped letting them in. She answered politely, firmly, without opening the door. She no longer sought friendship with Debbie. She no longer hoped for warmth that wasn't there. Instead, she focused on the family she and Garth were building. Messy, imperfect, but theirs. And for the first time in years, Chloe felt like she could breathe. She knew the outside world might judge her. People always said to play nice with in-laws, to be the bigger person, to keep the peace. But Chloe had learned that sometimes peace isn't keeping quiet while someone chips away at your dignity. Sometimes peace is saying no. And in her heart, she knew she wasn't the villain for that. Debbie did not take the new rules as a wake-up call. Instead, she treated them like a personal betrayal. To her, Chloe's words weren't boundaries, they were rejection. The phone calls started almost daily. Sometimes there were long voicemails filled with shaky breathing, as if she were barely holding herself together. Other times they came as text messages in the middle of the night. I can't sleep knowing my own son has turned his back on me. Or, I must have been a terrible mother for him to allow this. At first, Garth would listen, torn between guilt and anger. He had grown up being the one to soothe his mother, to carry the weight of her emotions. But as Chloe stood her ground, he began to see the pattern more clearly. It wasn't about love, it was about control. One afternoon, Debbie stopped by unannounced while Chloe was folding laundry in the living room. Debbie carried a basket of old clothes, insisting Chloe take them for the kids. Most of them were stained, outdated, or sizes too small. Chloe smiled politely and said no.
They didn't need them. Debbie's face darkened. And before Chloe could say more, she dumped the whole basket onto the floor. "You're ungrateful," she hissed. "Everything I do for this family, and it's never enough." Chloe calmly picked up the pile and set it outside the front door. The kids, peeking from the hallway, watched wide-eyed. Garth came home to find his mother's car still in the driveway, but Chloe standing tall at the door, keeping her from re-entering. That night, when the children asked what had happened, Chloe didn't badmouth Debbie. She only said, "Grandma is upset, but sometimes adults have to work through their feelings. That doesn't mean she can behave however she wants in our home." But the tension bled into the children's emotions too. Cindy, torn between her father's household and her grandmother's guilt, began to act out. She asked Chloe why Grandma said mean things about her, why Grandma told her that Chloe didn't really care about her. Chloe's heart broke, but she answered gently, "I'd care about you more than anything. Sometimes people say things when they're upset, but that doesn't make them true." Debbie, meanwhile, escalated. She began sending food home with Cindy after brief visits, food Chloe had explicitly banned for health reasons, bags of candy, soda, even milk after Chloe had explained why she couldn't have it while sick. It felt deliberate, almost like a test. Chloe confronted her once more, this time with Garth beside her. "You're not listening to us," Chloe said, her voice steady. "When you ignore our rules, you're not just disrespecting me, you're disrespecting both of us as parents." Debbie's tears came instantly, her body shaking with sobs. She collapsed into a chair, whispering about how no one respected her anymore, and how she was being cut out of her son's life. Garth, weary from decades of these scenes, didn't bend this time. "Mom," he said firmly, "this isn't about you being cut out. This is about respecting Chloe and respecting me. If you can't do that, then we need space." The silence after his words felt like thunderclap. Debbie stared at him as though he had struck her, then rose and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That night, Chloe expected Garth to crumble under guilt, but instead, he wrapped his arm around her and whispered, "I should have stood up like this a long time ago." Still, the strain was heavy. Debbie's absence grew more pronounced. She skipped family birthdays, only sending passive-aggressive texts. She told distant relatives that Chloe was cold, controlling, and unkind, painting herself as a victim of a cruel daughter-in-law. Word trickled back, and Chloe felt the sting of judgment from people who only knew Debbie's version. But something else happened too. The household grew steadier. The kids laughed more. Cindy began to relax, no longer caught in the crossfire of guilt and manipulation. Garth seemed lighter, more himself. For Chloe, it was bittersweet. She had not wanted a war with Debbie. In the beginning, she had wanted connection, even friendship, but she realized that peace was never going to come from sacrificing her own dignity. Peace had to come from drawing lines, even if others didn't like them. She sat one evening in the backyard, the children running through the sprinklers, the sun dipping low. Garth joined her, handing her a glass of iced tea. He watched the kids chase each other, their laughter spilling into the warm air. "This," he said softly, "is what matters." Chloe nodded. For the first time in years, she felt safe in her own home, free from the constant tension of Debbie's shadow. And though she knew the outside world might not understand, she also knew she wasn't wrong. Because protecting her family, even if it meant distance from someone who couldn't respect them, was not cruelty. It was love.
Life after Debbie's departure wasn't flawless, but it was quieter. The air in the house no longer felt heavy, and Chloe noticed that her children started to sleep better, laugh louder, and lean on her with more trust. Even Cindy, who once carried the burden of her grandmother's whispered doubts, began to relax into the rhythm of a home where the rules were clear and love didn't have strings attached. Chloe knew she would always be painted a certain way in Debbie's stories, the cold woman who came between a mother and a son. But she also knew the truth. She had tried. She had opened doors and extended hands. She had given Debbie chances, more than once. What she couldn't do, what she refused to do, was sacrifice her children's stability
or her partner's peace just to play nice in someone else's drama. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Chloe sat with Garth on the porch. The crickets sang in the background, and the warm breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass. Garth leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "I used to think keeping Mom happy was my responsibility, but it's not. She's responsible for her choices, and I'm responsible for protecting this family." Chloe reached for his hand, grateful not only for his words, but for the strength behind them. She had spent so long fearing that setting boundaries made her harsh, but now she saw them for what they were: guardrails for the people she loved most. The truth was simple. Families weren't defined by obligation alone. They were built on respect, trust, and kindness. And if someone couldn't honor those things, then keeping a safe distance wasn't cruel. It was necessary. Chloe finally felt the weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't the villain in this story. She was the one making sure her children grew up in a home where love wasn't laced with manipulation, where respect went both ways, and where laughter could fill the air without being drowned out by tears that demanded attention. She closed her eyes, listening to the easy rhythm of the night. For the first time in years, she felt certain she had done the right thing. Because sometimes the bravest choice wasn't playing nice. Sometimes the bravest choice was standing firm, knowing that love meant protecting your peace, even if it meant walking away.